In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the law of sines and show you how we can apply that to a triangle to find its missing sides. And while many of you may look at this and you may be used to using the Pythagorean theorem, you'll realize that you can't use the Pythagorean theorem because we do not know one of the values of the leg, right? Because if we knew one leg value and we knew the hypotenuse, we could just use the Pythagorean theorem. But in situations like this, you can't. And so we're going to go ahead and venture into this idea of a trigonometric ratio, which is sine. Now, when we talk about the law of sines, I want you to be considering that, and I'm just going to write like a little note up here. Sine is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. And that may sound familiar if you watched my intro video. And so we're going to keep that idea. The main thing that I always like to remember when using sine is that I'm always looking for something opposite an angle. So let me give you an example for that. There are three angles in this triangle. And I'm going to go ahead and call this angle right here, we'll call this angle A. So I'm going to put a capital A. That's angle A. And let's say over here we have angle B. And this 90-degree angle, we'll call that angle C. Now, whenever we're using sine, if we're going to use that function to solve for a missing variable like we see over here, whatever angle they give us, we want to find the variable that's opposite of that. So, for instance, I'm going to show you why. So, if I go over here to this right triangle where I'm showing my notes, for instance, if I look at A, the side of the triangle that has a relationship with A using sine is the side that's opposite the angle of A. So the opposite of A is side A of the triangle. Opposite B, and notice I'm just drawing arrows from the angle showing the opposite side, is this bottom leg of the triangle. And opposite C is the hypotenuse, this side of the triangle. And so I'm actually going to write out the law of sines, which is sine A, in other words, the angle of A, has a relationship with the side of the triangle, which is A, which is opposite the angle. And then sine B has a relationship with side B of the triangle, because it is opposite angle B. And sine C has a relationship with the side of the triangle opposite of angle C, which is the hypotenuse. The reason I'm showing you this is because by writing this out, this is what we call the formula for the law of sines. And we can find any missing side of a triangle using the law of sines, providing that we have at least 3 of the values for 2 of these that are set up as a proportion. So for instance, we could use sine A over A, sine B over B, or we could use sine B over B and sine C over C to find a missing side. And while this may look confusing initially, I'm going to show you how to set the problem up using one of these proportions that I just set up for you right here, using just variables. So for instance, I'm going to come over here. I recognize that this side is my sine A. I'm going to highlight it. So that's this angle A. Now, notice the value opposite of A is side A of the triangle over here. And notice over here we already have an A. So this A is opposite. I'm going to draw an arrow. And if it were to tell me to find the missing side of the triangle A, then I would go ahead and use this angle in place of the variable A. Because like in this case, right, we just do a diagram and I said this is angle A. But now we know what the angle is. We know the angle for A is 32 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and make my first problem. So I'm going to write sine A. But instead of an A, I'm going to replace it with a value of 32, because that's my angle, over side A. Now here they didn't give me a value for the side, right? It's unknown. We're trying to find it. So I'm just going to write the variable A underneath it. We're looking for that variable A. And this is going to be equal to sine, and in this case I'm actually not going to use B. because notice B has a variable as well. So I don't have a value that I can put in for B. I could figure out the angle, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm looking for a side of the triangle that has a value that I can use to set up this proportion. And I want you to notice that angle C has a value of 18. In other words, my hypotenuse is 18. And I know that angle C, this symbol here, represents a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to say sine 90 degree. In other words, this is sine C, C being the 90-degree angle, over side C of the triangle. And side C right here, right, this is equal to C is 18. And that's what I need. I need at least one side and two angles to set this up so that I can solve for A. Now once I have this proportion set up, we're going to do cross multiplying. And it's really inverse operations. Technically I'm going to multiply both sides by 18 to get rid of this denominator. I'm going to multiply both sides by A to get rid of that denominator. But teachers love to call this cross multiplying, and you could look at this as I'm simply multiplying A times sine 90. And you might be asking yourself, well, what does that look like? Well, you just take the A and you write it, put you a dot showing you're multiplying, and then write sine 90 after it. Now later on, we don't have to put the dot before it, but I'm just putting it right now so that you can see I'm actually multiplying A to sine 90. I'm cross multiplying these two values. I am also going to go ahead and cross multiply these two values, sine 32 and 18. So I'm going to say this is equal to 18. I'm going to put the 18 first because that's my number. Put a dot and then times sine 32. Okay, now we don't have an answer yet, but we have A times sine 90 is equal to 18 times sine 32. Now what I'm going to do is, my goal is to figure out what A is. And so no different than any equation we solve, if we know we're looking for the value of variable A, we need to isolate it. To isolate it, I got to get rid of this sine 90 that's being multiplied to it. And remember that the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I'm actually going to divide by sine 90 on the left side to get it away from my variable and isolate it. Now remember, if we divide on one side of the equation, we got to divide on the other side. So I'm also going to do sine 90 over here. Now anything can divide into itself one time, so sine 90 cancels. And all we're left with on the left side is simply A equals. And to figure out what A is equal to, on this right side, I got to put this in a calculator to figure out what the value is. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. So let me get my calculator over here. I'm going to type in 18 sine 32. Now you don't have to put times. I mean, you could, but you don't have to put the multiplication sign, because anytime you put sine after a number, the calculator understands that it's being multiplied. So I'll just put 18 sine 32, it's 32, which is my angle, right? That angle right there, that's angle A. And then I'm going to go ahead and divide that by sine 90. So divide it by sine 90. And I'm going to hit enter. And that gives me 9.538. So I'm going to write that down. So we have 9.538. Now a lot of your teachers, I'm noticing on these problems, they're asking y'all to round to the hundredths place. So we're going to round this to the hundredths place. So I'm going to underline the hundredths place and circle the thousandths. And remember, there's a rule that says 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. So if it's 4 or less, we leave it alone and we would just write it as 9.53. But because 8 is more than 5, so this is 5 or more, we got to raise the score. So we're going to change that 3 into a 4. So our final answer here is A is equal to 9.54. So that may look like a lot of work, but the more you do this, the easier it becomes. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the law signs again to go ahead and solve for B. So this is one side. Let me go ahead and do the other. Now for B is going to be a little bit different. if I'm going to use sine, now there's another way to solve it too, so this is the only way. You're going to see there's another video on cosine, which will show you another way that you could solve it instead of using the law of sines. But I'm going to go ahead and use sine. And to figure out this angle up here that's missing, right, because I need to know this angle because it's opposite of b, because I'm going to do the same thing. I need to go ahead and subtract 32 and 90 from 180, because remember there is 180 degrees in every triangle. So to figure out this missing angle, I'll just go ahead and take 180 and I'll subtract this 90 degree angle from it, and then I'll subtract this 32 degree angle from it, and what's left over is the angle above for b. So b is going to be 58 degrees. So I'm going to write that in. Now I'm going to go ahead and use this angle for b, and if I go across from it, right, the letter that goes with it, the side of the triangle that has a relationship with it, is b. And so I'm going to write right here sine b, but instead of a b, I'm going to put the value of angle b, which is 58. And then under sine 58, I'm going to go ahead and put my division sign, right? That fraction bar means it's division. And I'm going to put b, because we have sine b, which is 58, over the side. And then over here, I'm going to use sine 90 again, because we're going to use that c side since we do have our value for our hypotenuse. So I'll put sine 90 over 18. And once again, we're just going to cross multiply. So I'll move this up a little bit. You saw where I got the numbers from. And now we're going to cross multiply. I'm going to start by multiplying b to sine 90. And so I'll write that right here. b times sine 90 is equal to, and then we're going to cross multiply this 18 and the sine 58. So 18, I'm going to write it first, 18 times sine 58. Now from this point, right, I want to go ahead and isolate b. So the way I isolate it is, since it's being multiplied to sine 90, I'm just going to divide out sine 90. And what I do to one side to keep the equation balanced, I'm going to do to the other side. Those cancel, and I'm simply left with b is equal to, and we'll put this in a calculator, let it do all the work. And so I'm going to go ahead and put 18 sine 58 divided by sine 90. And it gives me 15.264. So 15.264. And we do want to round to the hundredths place. So the hundredths place is that 6. The number after it is the thousands, and it's 4. And remember, 4 or less, let it rest. So we are not going to change anything. So our final answer can be written as b is equal to 15.26. So we have used the law of sines, and we have solved for the side A of the triangle, and we have solved for side B of the triangle.